Welcome to a history chapter. Today, we delve into one of the most harrowing chapters of World War I, a battle that epitomized the sheer horror and futility of trench warfare. This is the story of the Battle of Verdun, a nightmare of trench war. Let's begin with the background. As dawn broke on the 20th century, Europe was a continent of increasing tensions and complex alliances. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in June 1914 was the spark that ignited the powder keg of these tensions, leading to the outbreak of World War I. This war, initially expected to be brief and decisive, quickly degenerated into a prolonged conflict that would redefine modern warfare and reshape the political landscape of Europe. The early months of the conflict saw rapid movements of armies in what is often referred to as the War of Movement. However, by the end of 1914, the war had stagnated into a deadly stalemate along the Western Front, stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss frontier. This front would witness some of the most grueling and prolonged battles in human history, characterized by trench warfare, where soldiers lived and died in mud-filled trenches under constant threat from artillery and machine gun fire. In this grim theater of war, France and Germany became locked in a deadly embrace. France, eager to avenge its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870–71, sought to reclaim the lost territories of Alsace and Lorraine. Germany, on the other hand, aimed to cripple France and secure its position as the dominant continental power. The Western Front, particularly the region around Verdun, became a focal point of these ambitions. Verdun, a fortified town on the Meuse River in northeastern France, held a special place in French military and national history. After the Franco-Prussian War, Verdun was heavily fortified to serve as a bulwark against future German invasions. Its symbolic significance to the French was matched by its strategic value, sitting at a point where the French line bulged into German-occupied territory. As such, Verdun was not just a military target, but a symbol of French resilience and national pride. On the eve of the Battle of Verdun, the situation on the Western Front was one of deadlock. Both sides had settled into a war of attrition, with neither able to deliver a decisive blow to the other. The human cost of the war had already been immense, with millions dead or wounded in the battles of the Marne, Ypres, and the Somme. The landscape of the Western Front was a testament to the brutal reality of modern warfare, scarred by shell craters, barbed wire, and the remnants of failed offensives. It was against this backdrop that the German High Command, under Chief of the General Staff Erich von Falkenhayn, conceived the plan to attack Verdun. Falkenhayn believed that by bleeding the French army white at Verdun, Germany could force France to sue for peace, thereby breaking the deadlock on the Western Front. The battle that would ensue at Verdun in 1916 was thus not just a military engagement, but a calculated attempt to undermine the will and capacity of France to continue the war. As 1916 began, both sides were unaware of the scale of the carnage that the Battle of Verdun would unleash. What was envisioned as a strategic maneuver by the Germans would evolve into one of the longest, most devastating battles in human history, a symbol of the futility and horror of World War I. The stage was set for a confrontation that would not only test the mettle of the French and German armies, but also come to define the enduring legacy of the Great War. As 1916 dawned, the war on the Western Front had settled into a grim routine of siege warfare, where both the Entente and Central Powers sought a breakthrough to end the stalemate. Amidst this backdrop, the German High Command, led by Chief of the General Staff Erich von Falkenhayn, conceived a plan that would, he hoped, alter the course of the war. Falkenhayn believed that by attacking a position of symbolic significance and strategic importance to the French, he could force France into a position of defense that would lead to its eventual exhaustion and collapse. The target chosen for this operation was Verdun, a fortress city that had stood as a bastion against invasion in the collective memory of France since its fortification after the Franco-Prussian War. Verdun was surrounded by a ring of forts, including Fort Douaumont and Fort Vaux, which were considered modern marvels of military engineering. However, by 1916, French military command, underestimating the likelihood of a major German offensive at Verdun, had stripped some of these forts of their heavy artillery, leaving the area more vulnerable than it appeared. The German plan, codenamed Operation Gericht, Judgment, was a masterclass in strategic deception and psychological warfare. Falkenhayn intended to bleed France white, believing that the French would commit their reserves to defend Verdun at all costs due to its historical and national significance. The operation was designed to capture the heights around Verdun, encircle the city, and subject it to a siege that would drain French morale and manpower. The Germans amassed a large number of troops and artillery in the area, preparing for a massive bombardment that would precede the infantry assault. On the French side, the defense of Verdun was initially under the command of General Joseph Joffre, the French commander-in-chief, who had spread his forces thinly across various sectors of the front. The defense of Verdun was not considered a priority in the larger scheme of French strategic planning, a misjudgment that would soon become apparent. However, as the German preparations could not be entirely concealed, French intelligence began to suspect an imminent offensive. The French command started to rush reinforcements to the Verdun sector, but it was uncertain if these efforts would be sufficient to withstand the impending storm. As the German artillery barrage commenced on February 21, 1916, signaling the start of the battle, the French garrison at Verdun was caught off guard but not unprepared. The initial German onslaught made significant gains, capturing Fort Douaumont, the linchpin of the Verdun fortifications, within days. The French response was swift, with General Philippe Pétain being appointed to command the Verdun sector. Pétain's leadership and organizational skills would prove crucial in the coming months, as he implemented a strategy of continuous rotation of troops and maximized the use of the Voie Sacrée, Sacred Way, a narrow road that became the lifeline for French forces defending Verdun, ensuring a steady flow of men and material to the front. The stage was thus set for a battle of attrition at Verdun, with both sides pouring in resources and manpower into a conflict that would symbolize the futility and horror of World War I. The German strategy of attrition and the French determination to hold Verdun at all costs would lead to one of the longest and bloodiest battles in modern warfare, testing the limits of human endurance and military strategy. The initial phase of the Battle of Verdun, commencing with the German artillery barrage on February 21, 1916, unleashed a torrent of shells upon the French lines, signaling the beginning of what would be a relentless and grueling battle. This opening salvo, one of the most intensive of the war, aimed to decimate French defenses and morale, paving the way for the German infantry's advance. The Germans employed a strategy of concentrated artillery fire, followed by infantry assaults, targeting the ring of forts and defensive positions surrounding Verdun. In the days following the bombardment, German forces, taking advantage of the element of surprise and the initial shock of their artillery, made significant gains. They captured key positions, including the village of Haumont, and most critically, Fort Douaumont, a cornerstone of the French defensive network around Verdun. The fall of Fort Douaumont to the Germans, just days after the beginning of the offensive, was a severe blow to the French. It not only provided the Germans with a strategic vantage point, but also symbolized the vulnerability of the French defenses. Despite these early setbacks, the French resolve stiffened under the leadership of General Philippe Pétain, who took command of the Verdun sector in late February. Recognizing the significance of Verdun, both strategically and symbolically, Pétain orchestrated a defense-in-depth strategy, fortifying secondary lines of defense while ensuring that reinforcements and supplies could reach the front via the Voie Sacrée. This road, barely wide enough for two-way traffic, became the lifeline of the French defense, allowing for the continuous rotation of troops and the delivery of essential supplies to the besieged garrison. The French countermeasures included a reorganization of their defensive tactics, shifting from a reliance on static forts to more flexible, infantry-based defenses that could adapt to the dynamics of modern artillery warfare. The French artillery, though initially outgunned, began to find its mark, inflicting significant casualties on the advancing German troops and slowing their momentum. As the battle wore on, the costs began to mount on both sides. The Germans, despite their early successes, found Verdun's defenses more resilient than anticipated. The French, for their part, were suffering heavy casualties, but were managing to hold on to key positions outside the immediate perimeter of Verdun. The battle, which Falkenhayn had intended to be a swift and decisive blow to French morale and manpower, was evolving into a protracted siege, with both sides digging in for a long and bloody struggle. The first phase of the Battle of Verdun underscored the brutality of World War I combat, with both sides employing massive artillery barrages, flamethrowers, and gas attacks in an attempt to dislodge the enemy. The human cost was staggering, with tens of thousands of soldiers killed or wounded in the opening weeks of the battle. Yet the French army, inspired by the motto "Ils ne passeront pas," they shall not pass, held firm, transforming Verdun from a military objective into a symbol of national defiance. As the battle progressed into its second phase, the initial German advantage began to wane. The French, under the steadfast command of General Philippe Pétain, had managed to stabilize their front lines despite the early setbacks. The logistical marvel of the Voie Sacrée ensured a steady flow of reinforcements and supplies, enabling the French army to mount a tenacious defense and prepare for counteroffensives. The German forces, led by Crown Prince Wilhelm, faced mounting difficulties. The terrain around Verdun, churned into a morass by artillery fire and spring rains, proved as formidable an obstacle as the French defenders themselves. The German High Command's expectation of a quick victory that would bleed the French army. White was confounded by the stubborn defense and the unexpectedly high German casualties. By late spring and early summer of 1916, the battle had transformed into a grueling war of attrition. The Germans continued their efforts to encircle Verdun and capture the remaining forts, notably targeting Fort Vaux. The battle for Fort Vaux became emblematic of the struggle at Verdun, with French defenders, under the command of Major Sylvain Eugene Raynal, holding out for weeks under siege conditions, without water and under constant bombardment, before finally being compelled to surrender in early June. Despite the fall of Fort Vaux, the French spirit remained unbroken. General Robert Nivelle, who succeeded Pétain as the commander of Verdun, Pétain was promoted to command the entire French Central Army Group, adopted the rallying cry, "They shall not pass." This phrase encapsulated the French resolve to defend Verdun at all costs. Nivelle initiated a series of counteroffensives, leveraging improved artillery tactics and the growing effectiveness of French air reconnaissance, which began to challenge German air superiority over the battlefield. The introduction of new tactics, including the creeping barrage, a curtain of artillery fire designed to advance just ahead of the infantry, allowed the French to recapture lost ground incrementally. The summer months saw fierce fighting, with both sides launching attacks and counterattacks over the same devastated landscapes, which by now bore little resemblance to the once verdant countryside. One of the most significant French counterattacks occurred in late June, targeting the German positions on the east bank of the Meuse. Although the gains were limited, these attacks underscored the French army's growing capability to take the initiative and put pressure on the German forces. The second phase of the Battle of Verdun highlighted the limitations of attrition warfare. Despite the enormous expenditure of lives and resources, the German advance had been halted and the front lines had stabilized. The French defense had transformed Verdun into a symbol of national resilience, a bulwark against the German onslaught that had failed to achieve its strategic objectives. As 1916 wore on, the battle's focus would shift, with both sides looking to break the deadlock that Verdun had come to symbolize. Yet, The enduring image of this phase of the battle was the incredible fortitude of the defenders, the tragic loss of life, and the realization that the war would likely not be won through a single decisive battle. As the Battle of Verdun entered its third phase in the latter half of 1916, the French army, now under the strategic guidance of General Robert Nivelle, began to seize the initiative. The relentless defense and incremental counterattacks had gradually eroded the German advantage, setting the stage for a more aggressive French posture. This period was marked by a series of French counteroffensives aimed at recapturing territory lost in the earlier stages of the battle and inflicting significant casualties on the German forces. The French strategic shift was partly enabled by the broader context of the First World War. The initiation of the Battle of the Somme by British and French forces in July 1916 forced the Germans to divert resources to the Somme front, relieving pressure on Verdun. This redistribution of German military efforts presented the French with an opportunity to press their advantage at Verdun. In August and September, the French launched a series of determined counterattacks. Utilizing improved artillery coordination and aerial reconnaissance, they targeted weak points in the German lines, aiming to recapture strategic positions, including the forts lost earlier in the battle. The French efforts were bolstered by the arrival of fresh troops and the deployment of new tactics, which included the use of tanks on other fronts, signaling a shift in the approach to trench warfare. One of the most symbolic victories for the French during this phase was the recapture of Fort Douaumont in late October 1916. The fort, which had fallen into German hands with scarcely a fight in the early days of the battle, was retaken after intense preparatory artillery bombardments and infantry assaults. The French recapture of Fort Douaumont, followed by the retaking of Fort Vaux, was not just a strategic success, but also a significant morale booster for the French army and public. These victories symbolized the reversal of fortunes at Verdun and demonstrated the effectiveness of the French counteroffensive strategy. The German forces, stretched thin by commitments across multiple fronts and suffering from the cumulative effects of attrition at Verdun, found it increasingly difficult to sustain their offensive posture. The heavy losses, logistical challenges, and the growing effectiveness of the French defense and counterattacks led to a gradual German withdrawal from the positions they had fought so hard to capture. By the end of 1916, the Battle of Verdun had transformed from a German offensive intended to bleed France white into a testament to French resilience and military adaptability. The battlefields around Verdun, scarred by months of relentless fighting, stood as a stark reminder of the war's brutality and the human capacity for endurance in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. The third phase of the Battle of Verdun marked a turning point in the conflict, shifting the momentum toward the French and setting the stage for the final phases of the battle. It underscored the shifting dynamics of World War I, where attrition, technological innovation, and strategic adaptability would come to define the latter years of the war. As 1916 drew to a close, the Battle of Verdun had evolved from a German offensive aimed at breaking the French will into a protracted struggle that epitomized the attritional nature of World War I. The last phase of the battle saw the French forces, buoyed by their successes in the previous months, undertaking operations to reclaim the entirety of the territory lost earlier in the year. This period was characterized by a determined push to erase the early German gains and to solidify Verdun's status as a symbol of national resilience. In the face of stiffening resistance and the shifting focus of the German military strategy towards the Somme and other sectors, the Verdun front witnessed a gradual decrease in German offensive operations. The German High Command, recognizing the untenability of their positions and the futility of further bloodshed for marginal territorial gains, began to withdraw forces from Verdun to reinforce more critical sectors on the Western Front. The French, sensing the opportunity to fully reverse the tide, launched a series of offensives in October and November. Under the command of General Nivelle, The French army made significant advances, leveraging artillery and infantry coordination to dislodge the remaining German forces from their entrenched positions. The recapture of Fort Douaumont and Fort Vaux, as symbols of the French defense, was followed by the liberation of other strategic locations, culminating in the recapture of the villages of Douaumont and Vaudevant-Damelot. These operations were not just tactical victories, but also served as powerful morale boosters for the French army and the nation. The ability of the French forces to reclaim ground lost in the earlier phases of the battle underscored the effectiveness of their evolving military strategy and the indomitable spirit of the troops fighting at Verdun. By December 1916, the Battle of Verdun effectively came to an end. The French had managed to recover almost all the territory lost to the Germans at the start of the battle. The German withdrawal marked the end of their attempts to capture Verdun, though sporadic fighting continued in the area until the end of the war. The last phase of Verdun highlighted the resilience and tactical ingenuity of the French army. It also reflected the broader strategic challenges faced by the Central Powers as they contended with multiple fronts and the increasing material and manpower advantages of the Entente powers. For Germany, Verdun became a costly endeavor that failed to achieve its strategic objectives, while for France, it emerged as a testament to national resolve and military capability. The battle's conclusion did not bring an end to the war, but it marked a significant chapter in the history of World War I. Verdun remained engraved in the collective memory of the French nation as a symbol of sacrifice and endurance, a legacy that would endure long after the guns fell silent. The Battle of Verdun was reason of the massive casualties and equipment loss paid by both sides. We can summarize them in a few points. Casualties: approximately 700,000 combined French and German casualties, including killed, wounded, and missing. French losses: estimated at around 362,000 casualties. German losses: estimated at around 337,000 casualties. Artillery shells fired. Millions of artillery shells were expended, significantly altering the landscape and contributing to the high casualty rates. Fortifications: key fortresses like Fort Douaumont and Fort Vaux changed hands multiple times, demonstrating the intense combat and strategic importance of these positions. Aircraft: the battle saw extensive use of reconnaissance and combat aircraft, marking one of the first major uses of air power in warfare. Both sides suffered losses in aircraft and crew. Ammunition and equipment: the extensive use of artillery, machine guns, rifles, and early grenades resulted in massive expenditure of ammunition and the loss of significant quantities of military equipment. These figures underscore the immense scale of human and material cost at Verdun, reflecting the battle's intensity and the broader attritional nature of World War I. The Battle of Verdun, spanning most of 1916, culminated in a Pyrrhic victory for France. The defense and eventual counter-offensive at Verdun showcased the French army's resilience and tactical evolution in the face of unprecedented adversity. However, the victory came at a tremendous cost. Both sides suffered staggering losses, with estimates of casualties, including killed, wounded, and missing. The landscape around Verdun was transformed into a desolate expanse of shell craters, destroyed forests, and villages obliterated by artillery fire, a haunting testament to the battle's ferocity. The French emerged from the battle with their national pride and military reputation intact, having successfully defended Verdun against all odds. The phrase "Ils ne passeront pas," they shall not pass, attributed to General Nivelle, became a rallying cry for French resistance, embodying the spirit of defiance that pervaded the French defense of Verdun. The battle's conclusion reinforced French morale and demonstrated to the Allies that France remained steadfast in its commitment to the war effort. For Germany, Verdun represented a missed opportunity and a misallocation of resources. The initial strategy, aimed at bleeding France white, ultimately failed to break the French army or force France out of the war. Instead, the battle consumed German manpower and materiel that could have been deployed more effectively on other fronts. The high casualties and the inability to capture Verdun dealt a blow to German morale and raised questions about the High Command's strategic judgment. The aftermath of Verdun had significant implications for military strategy and tactics. The battle illustrated the limitations of attritional warfare and the need for innovation on the battlefield. The use of artillery, the importance of air reconnaissance, and the evolving role of infantry signaled shifts in military doctrine that would influence subsequent conflicts. Moreover, Verdun became a symbol of the war's broader futility and the immense human cost of modern industrialized warfare. The battle's legacy was etched into the collective memory of the French and German peoples, serving as a somber reminder of the war's devastation. Verdun and its forts, especially Douaumont and Vaux, became hallowed ground, sites of national memory and mourning. In the years following World War I, Verdun was memorialized through monuments, cemeteries, and the ossuary at Douaumont, which houses the remains of unidentified soldiers from both sides. These memorials stand as a testament to the battle's enduring impact on France, Germany, and the world. They remind future generations of the courage of those who fought and the importance of striving for peace to avoid the repetition of such tragedies. The Battle of Verdun, with its tactical stalemates, strategic miscalculations, and unimaginable human suffering, encapsulates the essence of World War I. As we conclude our journey through the haunting fields of Verdun, we are reminded of the resilience and fortitude that defined one of the most grueling battles in history. The Battle of Verdun, a nightmare of trench warfare, has taken us deep into the heart of human endurance, where every soldier's story is a testament to the spirit of survival against all odds. We've seen the landscape of war, not just as a backdrop for conflict, but as a silent witness to the courage and sacrifices of those who fought. Thank you for joining us on this solemn exploration of Verdun's trenches, where the echoes of the past remind us of the cost of war and the value of peace. If this episode moved you, consider subscribing to A History Chapter for more insights into the moments that have shaped our world. Share this journey with others, and together, let's keep the memory of Verdun alive, honoring those who face the nightmare of trench warfare head-on. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, the pages of history are filled with stories waiting to be told.